Welcome to Multimodal Innovation. It's NOACA's 2013 annual meeting, and we are pleased that you are all here with us today. It is exciting that we are holding this year's event right here in the brand new Cleveland Convention Center. How many of you are here for the very first time? Can you raise your hand? That is phenomenal. Well, this is our convention center. This is our home. For anyone who is interested, there will be a tour of the facility after the program at 2 p.m., and staff will help direct you accordingly. We have a full and informative program today, but before we begin, I would like to take the time to recognize the Board of Directors of NOACA. Can all of the members of the Board of Directors please stand? Board members? Board members and alternates. As we all know, we've had a busy year this year, and so I just want to let you all know we appreciate everything that you've done. Thank you very much. I want to thank each and every one of you, the board and the alternates and the staff of NOACA, for your hard work and dedication, but most importantly for your dedication to our region. We have been very busy setting the course for NOACA's future, which we'll hear about today when our director comes up and speaks. We've made a lot of changes, a lot of them, that are very critical to our success, but we did it together, and that alone is worth another round of applause. I'd like to also just note that we have several other elected officials who are present here today that are not on the board of NOACA but came out today to show their support for us. So if you're an elected official, I think I have a list here, and this is always kind of scary to do. We have the mayor of Avon Lake. We have Karen Kandinsky from the legislative office. She's the district director for Senator Portman. We have, I believe, State Representative Bill Patman, Nicholas Turner representing Congresswoman Marcy Kapler's office, and if there's anyone else I forgot, please join us in giving them all a round of applause. Thank you for being here today. The annual meeting is a time to learn about the important work that we do here at NOACA in planning for multimodal transportation and looking out for our region's air and water quality, bicycle and pedestrian efforts that make up our dedication to transportation. To give you a better idea of our mission and recent accomplishments, we have produced a report for this meeting titled Multimodal Innovations for a New Era, which highlights some of those activities. Please take this with you. Here's a copy of it here, and review it and share it. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask any member of NOACA or our director or any board member. We'd be glad to talk to you about what we're working on. Inside, it also contains today's agenda, as well as a biography of our keynote speaker, Federal Transit Administrator Peter Rogoff. Peter, thank you for being here again today. It means a lot to have you here at our annual meeting, and we really appreciate it. Thank you. In addition, we also have Marisol Simon here with us as well. We appreciate everything that you do for us, Marisol. We know that our success is partly because you're so hands-on with us here, and you intertwine a liaison for us with the Administrator's Office, and we truly appreciate it. So thank you very much. You'll also find displays in the back today by the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority, the Northeast Ohio Sustainable Communities Consortium, Lake Tran, and Cleveland Skylift. Thank you to these organizations for coming today to share information about the work that they're doing in Northeast Ohio. If you have any questions today during our program, please look for NOACA staff. You can locate them. They have green ribbons on. Or if you'd like to talk to any of the board members, we have blue ribbons on. And now I get to do the fun part of turning the program over to our Executive Director, Ms. Grace Gallucci. Grace has been with NOACA a little over a year now and has made great strides in laying the groundwork for the agency's future. Grace is a Clevelander. She was here with us for many years working at GCRTA, and then she came back here to run NOACA. And I think that that's a testament to what we do here, not only in our region, but in our overall community. And having Grace back here for us is a value added. So Grace, please come take it away. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President McCall, and thank you for your leadership and guidance during this past year as NOACA Board President. It is my privilege to serve as NOACA's Executive Director and to be here today. And I do want to say I am thrilled to be back home. Chicago was great, Miami was great, but there is no place like home. I think we should give a round of applause for Northeast Ohio and the greater Cleveland area. It is a greater privilege for me to introduce our very special guest, the Honorable Frank G. Jackson, Mayor of Cleveland, who's going to say a few words of welcome. But first, let me say a few words about him. Frank Jackson is the 56th mayor of Cleveland. He grew up in Cleveland, and you won't find a stronger advocate for the city and for Northeast Ohio. He was elected to city council in 1989 and served as a council member for 16 years, including a stint as the city council president. In January of 2006, he began his tenure as mayor of Cleveland and focused on several initiatives, which included ensuring that every child in the city has access to high-quality education, improving public safety and transportation opportunities, promoting the region's economy, and revitalizing the city's neighborhoods. Mayor Jackson has said that he would know when he's made a difference if his work unites the lives of children, seniors, disabled people, families, businesses, and all who share the city of Cleveland. He demonstrates robust leadership in seeking regional solutions, and we appreciate his strong support of NOACA. Please help me welcome my mayor, your mayor, our mayor, Mayor Frank G. Jackson.
Good morning. And how are you? Good, good. You know, I want to start off by thanking the board of directors at NOACA and its chairman for all the hard work that they put in this year and every other year in ensuring that our area has economic growth and is prosperous. Also want to welcome Mr. Rogoff to Cleveland. I appreciate you being here, and as you can tell and know that transit is very important to us here in Cleveland, and also our partnership with NOACA and RTA is very important. One of the things I talk about often in regards to our regional economy is that the different modes of transportation is really the lifeline of commerce. It serves to move people, goods, and materials throughout our region and throughout our country, and is essential to economic growth and stability. Now, NOACA has ensured this region's position as a player in the national economy by its investment in our infrastructure. And that's an investment that all of us look forward to and we need. And it's strategic. It's strategic. Now, NOACA has gone even further in that they are in passing a resolution of supporting a community benefits approach. And that's very important to Cleveland and I believe the entire region because it serves to keep wealth and jobs and investments local and helps to, again, sustain our economy and grow our economy. And I will tell you that NOACA's resolution on the community benefits agreement was essential for the U.S. Conference of Mayors in adopting a community benefits approach and passing a resolution on the national level. Again, I want to thank NOACA for that, along with all the other work that they do, not only in Cleveland and in Northeast Ohio, but really position us in a way that we are a true competitor nationally and that we're able to ensure that this region grows and prospers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Jackson. I'd also like to thank you for your service to this great city. You've provided solid leadership with respect to sustainability, complete streets, and downtown development. And you're a great partner to NOACA. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, thank you for all your efforts. Please accept this engraved pen as a token of our appreciation.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to start today's discussion about multimodal innovations by talking about a multimodal vision for the NOACA region's transportation system. In doing so, I think we need to look at the greater Cleveland of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I'm a believer in the maxim, make no small plans. That comes from the famous planner Daniel Burnham. And if there's one thing that I learned or took from my time in Chicago is that we need to think big. I think it's important to view our regional vision as comprehensively as possible and to build that vision from the ground up. To set the stage, let's take a brief look at the recent past on a regional basis. There has been little change in our population as people move from one place to another but stay within the region. In fact, the population in NOACA's 5-county region has been remarkably stable for the last 50 years. The 1960 census showed the 5-county population of 2.1 million, and that number has remained virtually the same in the 2010 census. We're simply taking up more space and demanding more infrastructure within the regional environment. Beginning in the 1950s, the region underwent an unprecedented post-war boom in the suburbs, driven by job growth and GI loans, a boom that also had a significant effect on the region's transportation system. The first ring of automobile suburbs emerged, and soon we were undeniably a car-centric culture. Since that time, the automobile has become increasingly dominant as a means of transportation. The result of mobility due to plentiful jobs and affordable automobiles has led the migration to more distant suburbs, more distant places. And although that's not necessarily a bad thing, I do love my car. I have a convertible, but I also love my transit system. We need to think about the overall implications. And a lot has been written about this region experiencing sprawl without growth. But that's an old story. We don't want to talk about that. What we want to talk about are the emerging trends that we're seeing. Change is happening in greater Cleveland, in our region. We're now seeing the younger generation lead a movement back to the core. Cleveland's neighborhoods, including downtown, and its first-ring suburbs like Lakewood, Cleveland Heights, and Parma. Downtown Cleveland has experienced an increase in residents over the last 5 years of 5,000 people, doubling to 10,000. Downtown developments such as the Health Line, the Horseshoe Casino, and East 4th Street are making Cleveland a more attractive and vibrant city. The Health Line project alone has spurred $4.3 billion in economic development. This has created more than 13,000 new jobs. Mayor Jackson's initiatives to remake Public Square and the lakefront will surely build upon that success. Demand for multimodal transportation choices has driven the development of bike and transit facilities over the last decade, and that trend is accelerating. NOACA created its first regional bike plan in 1997. Since that time, we've gone from having 8 miles of bike lanes to boasting 55 miles of bike lanes. We've gone from 105 miles of bike paths to 260 miles of bike paths. Since its pilot program in 2000, the proliferation of bike racks on buses has created a real multimodal opportunity for many individuals. RTA now carries more than 50,000 bikes each year on its buses and trains. This is something that's also near and dear to my heart. I worked on that project in my first few years here with the RTA, and it's a testament particularly to the supporters as well as the detractors who often said, will we ever see a sighting of a bike on a bus? Yes, we see 50,000 of them annually. That's terrific. This program is called Rack and Roll, and what a fitting name in the city that rocks and rolls. Demand for transit is also growing, and our region's transit agencies are reporting increasing demand for services. Demographics will further drive this trend over the next 10 to 15 years. While the region's population is projected to shrink by 2% from 2015 to 2025, the population for seniors who tend to be less mobile will increase by 28%. Clearly, the need for transit for more livable communities and demand response transit service for older Ohioans is about to explode. We're seeing that here as well as across the country. And in response to this growing demand, NOACA's Transportation Improvement Program includes $410 million for transit and $19 million for bike and pedestrian-related projects. Part of what's driving this change is the fresh thinking that's coming into the discussion of regional issues. Since the beginning of 2013, the Northeast Ohio Sustainable Communities Consortium, through its Vibrant 2040 initiative, has launched a scenario planning process that covers 12 counties in Northeast Ohio. And at the core of the findings is that this current trend or pattern of growth in Northeast Ohio is not fiscally sustainable, and there's strong support for doing things differently. This initiative recently received editorial support from all our major newspapers in Northeast Ohio: the Cleveland Plain-Dealer, the Akron Beacon-Journal, the Canton Repository, Warren Tribune-Chronicle, and most recently in the Crain's Cleveland Business. I'm very pleased that NOACA is a part of this important initiative, which brings together planning perspectives all across our 12-county region. It's this kind of planning that's essential to developing a roadmap for the future. That's why one of the things that I sought to address in my first year here at NOACA was to work with our board of directors to develop a regional strategic plan for the agency. And to that end, I would be remiss if I did not recognize my board for their leadership and their support that they have provided, as well as for their very progressive approach for moving NOACA forward. I especially want to thank President McCall and the Executive Committee for their efforts and their mentorship of my tenure. Our strategic planning effort is intended to provide a regional vision and determine where NOACA will focus its efforts and resources in the years ahead. It will result in a clear vision for the agency's future with specific targets and measurable benchmarks. I view this strategic plan as a living document and will need to review and adjust it periodically to ensure that we're making progress towards our goals. We will work over the next few months to engage the public as well as the various communities in this effort. To make this plan work, we will need to, 1, determine NOACA's future role in the region by transforming the conceptual goals of the visioning process into realistic, achievable targets. It's all about performance measures, helping us keep on track, keeping the process focused, and keeping the process objective. We'll need to identify and analyze new partnerships with other entities, public entities, private entities, nonprofits, the general public. There are so many potential partners in this region with such rich resources, financial and otherwise. We need to harness that energy and that knowledge. Finally, it's essential that we engage the public and elected officials. NOACA's planning process must be proactive and transparent, one that engages the community stakeholders to gain very meaningful feedback. To execute this strategic plan, it was first necessary to create a new organizational structure for the agency, one that works to more consistently be responsive to its communities and the people they serve. In the past year, we've reorganized NOACA's staffing structure to improve management, accountability, and communications, and overall to improve service to the people. This new staffing structure creates distinct divisions with directors and managers who are dedicated to, 1, working with project sponsors to develop programs and projects in a way that uses our funding resources most effectively. Conduct transportation and environmental planning through a data-driven process to create better projects. Conduct research and analysis to support our planning and programming efforts. Manage our finances to ensure that we conduct our work efficiently and effectively. And drive external relations to engage stakeholders, legislative decision makers, and the general public in a meaningful and proactive way. Ultimately, our goal is to arm decision makers, not just the NOACA board, but decision makers across the 5-county region with data that helps them make the best decisions for the region. To that end, after much discussion, the NOACA Board of Directors last month approved a substantial revision to the agency's Code of Regulation, the first one in over 10 years. The new code is designed to create more and better opportunities for the Board of Directors to influence and drive NOACA's policies and processes. The code creates 5 new standing committees that will deal specifically with planning and programming, policy, governance, finance and audit, and external affairs. NOACA's work program for the year details how we'll accomplish our goals through staffing activities as well as interaction with these committees. I'd like to tell you just a few highlights about that. Number one, and this is our priority for the 2014 year, is asset management. When it comes to developing and funding transportation projects, there's always a number of goals. First, we need to preserve the existing infrastructure and maintain a state of good repair. Our Transportation Improvement Program dedicates 88% of its highway funding towards maintaining the existing system and only 12% to enhancing or expanding it. It's fair to say then that NOACA takes a fix-it-first approach to project funding. It's also fair to say, however, that there isn't enough funding to maintain the existing transportation system properly. The 2013 Report Card for America's Infrastructure by the American Society for Professional Engineers agrees this is the case for the nation as well, grading the nation's infrastructure D for roads, D for transit, and C for bridges. While the nation invests $91 billion annually at the local and state as well as federal levels, the Federal Highway Administration that more than $170 billion would be needed to bring that system truly into a state of good repair. So at this point, we're only spending half of what we truly need. In fact, 45% of American households lack any access to transit, and millions more have inadequate service levels. And while we can and must appeal to lawmakers to find more revenue for infrastructure, we also have to ensure that we're allocating the resources we have wisely. Given this, the need for transportation asset management is critical. That's why we've included an asset management project as the centerpiece of this year's work program. Consider that the NOACA region's long-range transportation plan, which has a horizon out to 2035, calls for investing $9 billion to maintain and enhance more than 8,000 miles of roadway. Included in that is more than $600 million to maintain 3,000 bridges and nearly $850 million to support 5 transit agencies that serve a population of 2.1 million. And although those numbers sound dramatic, $9 billion with a B, it's not enough to get us to where we need to be. NOACA's new program will incorporate asset management into the long-range planning process and will consider the life cycle costs of infrastructure. Our preliminary asset management report, which uses data from the 2010 time period, identifies an estimated $1.4 billion needed in NOACA's 5-county region, which would be the optimal amount for pavement repair and replacement. So it's the backlog of taking our system to a state of good repair. Even if we were to look at this conservatively and do the minimal amount possible to repair that pavement, we're looking at close to $600 million. But also note that less than 1/3 of the poorest performing roads in our region are currently included in our transportation improvement plan. In addition, we plan to revise NOACA's regional transportation investment policy substantially this year. In this era of limited resources and aging infrastructure, the necessity of making project funding decisions in an objective, data-driven way is greater than ever. If there was ever a time to focus on doing things that make economic sense, the time is now. There isn't time, however, now to go into every aspect of our work program in detail, but I want to say a few things about what we're going to emphasize. We're going to better connect multimodal research and data related to congestion, safety, travel time, and other factors to projects. We'll improve project development, budgeting, monitoring, and the delivery of those projects. We'll expand our transit and freight planning efforts, and we'll increase public involvement efforts to improve communication with legislators, other government organizations, the news media, and the general public. As with asset management, we're developing performance measures for all these activities. Now, I would like to talk specifically about the theme of this year's annual meeting, multimodal innovation. It's really about transportation choices for people. When I was asked by a plain dealer reporter upon accepting this position what my expectation or what my goal was, I said, I want to give transportation choices to people. That's what freedom is about. That's what being an American is about. And our mission is to help make more and better modal choices available. Given the projected growth in the region's senior population over the next 10 to 15 years, as well as the current trends of the young generations, there will obviously be a tremendous need for public transit, and not just in the cities. Consider that the region's transportation network serves well over 500,000 customers in a typical week. More than half of all trips are work-related, while in rural areas, more than half of the trips are seniors or people with disabilities. This is to say, multimodalism isn't a fad, nor is it a luxury. It's about transportation options that people want and that people need. Our planning efforts can't just be about pavement and the automobile. And again, I do want to make it clear, NOACA is not trying to vilify the automobile. Again, I love my convertible. But we do want to make it clear that we are working towards a greater sense of balance in the region. And being responsive to the upcoming generations is important to us. It's about attracting and retaining our best and brightest by enhancing the livability of our communities in our region. Consider, for example, that bicycling is increasingly popular and many local communities are making bike facilities part of their infrastructure investment plans. In addition, more and more people are making walking a part of their commute to work. What's important to note here is this is a trend that is happening across the country. In order to make our region competitive, we need to be right there. The Public Interest Research Group recently reported that after 60 years of almost constant increases in the annual number of miles Americans drive, they've decreased their driving per capita since 2004 for 8 straight years in a row. Americans are driving less. We can attribute that to a number of things. We can attribute it to the high cost of gasoline. We can attribute it to people that want to text, and of course you can't text and drive, so we're looking at public transit as being an option there. We're perhaps thinking about that as a result of people being more environmentally conscious, more cost conscious, more practical, the economy. There's a number of reasons, but this trend is very, very real. And it's been clearly led by the millennial generation. Average driving miles for Americans aged 16 to 34 fell 23% between 2001 and 2009. That's nearly a quarter, 25% drop over a 10-year period. And this trend is only matched by a long-term slide in the rates that teens are obtaining their driver's license. I'd also be remiss if I didn't talk about how the trends impact our natural environment and public health. We do a lot at NOACA to educate and inform the public about air and water quality issues. For example, we issue alerts on days when air quality is forecast to be unhealthy. We'll also advise the public on how to limit contributions to ground level ozone and to water runoff, which can affect the health of our watersheds. But one tangible way that NOACA can make a truly significant impact on the health of its environment is through the planning and development of multimodal projects. Again, giving people a choice of transportation. Think of this, one bus can supplant more than 40 cars on the road. While the number of bike commuters might be small and growing right now, also think of this, every single bike on the road replaces an automobile, which then means that it's reducing congestion and provides a net reduction in emissions. According to a report called The Status of Public Transportation in Ohio by the Ohio Department of Transportation, the current state of funding for transit has been reduced to levels not seen since the 1980s. Meanwhile, at the federal level, we are very much looking forward to the next reauthorization and the opportunities that it will provide for us. As a result, we'll need to encourage our lawmakers to find better ways to fund transportation infrastructure, multimodal infrastructure, and at a more comprehensive and for a more comprehensive system at the state and local levels. Finally, I'd like to talk about how we're stepping up our communications and public involvement efforts. This week, we launched a new website, and I invite you to visit that website at noaca.org if you haven't already done so. We are also using social media. We began that about a year ago, and we wanted to ensure that we were reaching out to broader audiences to gain their feedback. We invite you to take a look at Facebook and like us on it. Follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @noaca_MPO, and you can use that Twitter handle for our upcoming Q&A panel. You can tweet us questions, and we will try to answer them. In the next few weeks, we have an online tool that will show detailed information about the projects in our TIP. In addition, our External Relations Division will be working to build relationships with local governments, partner organizations, the media, and lawmakers. It's now more important than ever to communicate effectively and do so in a very transparent way. In closing, change in Northeast Ohio is happening as we speak. It presents a challenge and an opportunity. I'm thrilled to be associated with this organization and this region at such a time of dynamic change. To reach the vision that I've outlined here today, we'll need the region to come together. We'll need support for legislative action to improve transportation funding. We'll need cooperation and collaboration to develop the practices that are best for this region, given our limited resources. And we need to develop a meaningful dialogue with you to find best ways to represent the diverse needs of the region. I look forward to working with all of you, and I look forward to a wonderful new era in Greater Cleveland. And even more so, I thank you for welcoming me back to Cleveland. This is truly the best place in the nation. I'm glad to be home. Thank you for your time and your attention. At this point, we're just going to go ahead and allow you to finish lunch for a few minutes, and then we will pick up with our main speaker, Peter Rogoff.
So quiet. Never had a room this quiet with all these planners. I'm just joking. I hope that you are enjoying your lunch, and please continue as we begin to resume the program. It gives me a great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, FTA Administrator Peter Rogoff. Administrator Rogoff was confirmed as the administrator by the U.S. Senate in May of 2009. He has led the agency through a period of historic change, record-setting accomplishments, and agency-wide process improvements to meet the American public's growing need for public transportation services. Most recently, Administrator Rogoff has ensured that the FTA is playing an active and effective role in the response, recovery, and restoration of transit agencies affected by the worst transit disaster in the U.S. history as a result of Hurricane Sandy, particularly in New York and New Jersey. He has also presided over the transition from the Safety Lou to the MAP 21, and MAP 21, whatever that'll be coming up soon, the new 2-year Surface Transportation Authorization. The new law reflects many of FTA's and the U.S. Department of Transportation's highest policy priorities to strengthen public transportation nationwide. In particular, Administrator Rogoff was instrumental in helping the Obama administration develop and transmit new safety legislation to Congress that is now part of MAP 21. The FTA now has the authority to establish and enforce minimum transit safety standards on all federally funded rail transit systems. And I'm glad the GCRTA and Lake Tran are all in compliance there. Under Administrator Rogoff's leadership, the agency has made significant investments in several public transit projects of regional and national significance. Of course, we have our own health line here, and we broke ground this morning on another one locally to the Cleveland area. In fiscal years 2011 and 2012 alone, FTA signed more capital construction agreements for transit projects than in any two-year period in the agency's history. Prior to his FTA appointment, Administrator Rogoff served for 22 years on the staff of the Senate Appropriations Committee, including 14 years as the Democratic Staff Director of the Transportation Subcommittee. Please join me in welcoming Administrator Peter Rogoff. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Valarie, and thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. Please keep eating if you still have food in front of you. I'm going to share some thoughts from the federal perspective today. And if they sound very reminiscent of the presentation that Grace gave, I think it's because we at the federal U.S. DOT, and particularly at the FTA, are focused on many of the exact same priorities as NOACA. And we were joking at the table here with Grace that if I was going to stand up and give the same presentation and just add 4 zeros to every one of the numbers that she had presented. But put another way, one thing that was clear is from our perspective, NOACA, under its new leadership and with its new direction, is focused on the right challenges and embodying the right vision. Things like transit asset management, the state of good repair of our systems, strategic investments, using research to inform our decisions is really the way we're going to make progress not only in Northern Ohio, but across the country with transportation, given the funding challenges we have, the demographic challenges we face, and especially when we're all trying to do more with less. Let me just sort of, for some of you who have not met me, as Valarie gave a very clear explanation of my role, but I have to say that it is a great privilege to continue to serve as the Federal Transit Administration. It's a surprise to no one that the Obama administration owes a great debt to the state of Ohio in making sure that we had 4 more years to serve. And in that regard, it is great to be back here in the most populated region of Ohio. One of the reasons it's a great privilege is so much of what we do at the FTA goes right to the wheelhouse of so many of President Obama's highest priorities, whether it is reducing our dependence on foreign oil, reducing greenhouse gases, giving a more livable transportation experience for working people, really for all people, all across the country. Today was this morning when we dedicated the West Line, the West Side Express BRT. This is just another one of those fun days to be out of the office because it's all a celebration and it's all good. It's a great vision. It's a great project. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Let me also say it's a very exciting time to be at the U.S. DOT because we are now serving under a great new secretary. We all loved and appreciated the leadership that Secretary LaHood provided the department for the last 4 years. But we now have in Secretary Anthony Fox a leader with great hands-on experience at the local level in making transportation work in his region. And in his particular region, namely in his role as mayor of Charlotte, he faced similar but also different challenges, which is to say his population was growing rapidly, growing rapidly far beyond what they could afford in terms of deploying new investments for transportation to accommodate that rapidly growing population. But importantly, he ran the streets and transit departments within his own city out of city government. In that regard, he is an end user and has experienced all that works well and all that doesn't work well with the Federal Highway Administration process and the Federal Transit Administration process. And he has come to us and challenged not just FHWA and FTA, but the entire U.S. Department of Transportation to work to make our processes more efficient and more user-friendly, especially for those end users like mayors who put these dollars to work and face the public most directly when they do or don't work. So we are greatly benefiting from his experience. One of the other things he did, which I think is very important as mayor of Charlotte, is when economic times got tough, he sort of doubled down and convinced his city council that it was all the more important to continue to invest and not take the throttle back, and actually enjoy further investments at very beneficial contracting prices to ensure that now, as his region, like this region, is coming out of the recession, that they are better situated to serve the challenges going forward. Like I said, we dedicated the West Side Express this morning. It really is a great project serving two great cities under the leadership of two great mayors. The FTA, it's about a $20 million investment creating BRT up Clifton Boulevard connecting Cleveland and Lakewood. And as Joe Calabrese pointed out this morning, it's really not just Cleveland and Lakewood, because there are all of the communities farther west than Lakewood that have bus service that run into Lakewood that people will connect with for this great new BRT service. There's a lot of enthusiasm. We're talking about new vehicles. We're talking about regular 10-minute headways, station stops that are going to be well designed, that's going to protect the residents from the elements, whether they're the 97-degree days that you had a couple of days ago, or what looks like the 38-degree day that you're going to have tomorrow, and everything in between. It is a very good visionary product that, frankly, as a number of the local leaders pointed out, has been in the making for a very long time. FTA was pleased to provide 80% of the funding for this. We provided about $16.3 million. The city of Lakewood, the city of Cleveland, other RTA resources have filled out the difference. And what I pointed out to a number of people this morning is I view this as sort of Cleveland replicating what it has already become a national model for doing. I can't tell you, I was talking to Joe yesterday as we were riding in on the train. I couldn't imagine how much time his staff must put into hosting all of these visitors from all over the country who are considering BRT and want to come see the Health Line. They want to come see how to do BRT right. They've heard about the ridership. They've heard about the ridership growth, some 60%. They've heard about the investments that have been made in the corridor, and that, yes, it's not rail, and yes, it was a lot more affordable than rail, but have brought about the ridership and the investments all the same. Like I said, whether it's in El Paso or Nashville or the Pacific Northwest, when they make pitches to city council, to state legislatures, to governors as to the vision for a new BRT line, the slides they're putting up are of the Cleveland Health Line. You've got a lot to be proud of there. And I just see today's project between Cleveland and Lakewood as really Cleveland replicating its own successes to serve yet more communities and tackling many of the demographic challenges that Grace pointed out in terms of who's driving and the age of the population. Also importantly, it's going to be a jobs winner for the area. And it's not just in the jobs created in the construction of the stations and the vehicles. The wheels for the vehicles are going to be made in Akron. There's brake valves that are going to be manufactured in Elyria. Flooring and tiles are made in Akron. The wheels are actually made here in Cleveland. But it's also going to generate jobs in Minnesota, where the buses are assembled, in Indiana, Nebraska, Michigan, Illinois, and Wisconsin. All areas that need the jobs, all areas that are contributing to the larger regional economy. And I think importantly, this particular project had its design funding financed through the Recovery Act. And that is precisely what the Recovery Act was intended to do, create jobs. This is one where many people questioned when the Recovery Act, or also sometimes known as the stimulus, came forward, whether any money should be going into design and not just construction, because design only creates so many jobs, and who knows if there'll be money at the other end to actually build the project that was designed. Joe and his team, the cities of Cleveland and Lakewood, the overall resources that NOACA puts out there, has demonstrated that that was a wise decision, that we were going to lay the groundwork for a better and more prosperous region through the stimulus money. And it has proven true with the project today. I think Grace teed up well some of the issues that I always talk about on the road, and that is, we face in the public transit arena a number of political challenges. There are always some political naysayers. There are always some people in high places who don't get the vision. But it does not worry me so much today as it did some years ago, maybe 10 or 15 years ago in my transportation career. The reason I say that is I think there's an absolute inevitability about the public transit solution, and public transit having a larger seat at the table and a more prominent role going forward. And it really relates to some of the issues that Grace laid out earlier. It also has to do with the fact that there's no economist anywhere that you can find who is predicting a long, enduring trend for stable and low gas prices going forward. The demographic issues as it relates to the aging of the population, and the fact that our seniors want to age in place and want to be able to stay in their homes and want to be able to be vibrant members of their community, is going to create that demand. The fact that, as Grace pointed out, dramatically fewer young people are getting their license immediately upon reaching the age to get their license. I'll use myself as an example. My son is now reaching the age where he can start, God help us all, getting on the road and training to drive. I've basically made clear to him that there's not another car coming into this household, and no, he may not use mine. But what I will do is load unlimited fare media onto his Smart Trip card, which is the interoperable card we use in the Washington, D.C. area. Between that and his bike, that's how he's going to get around. I'm going to save a ton of money doing it that way, and the world will be a safer place doing it that way. But I think importantly, he's not blanching at it. His colleagues in high school aren't blanching at it. And frankly, I think probably to their credit, one of the factors that hasn't been talked about so much as to that, other than demographic issues as to who's having children reaching driving age, one of the issues that has played itself into so few young people driving is the insurance companies have figured out that they need to charge according to the risk that those young drivers present. And a number of my friends who have high schoolers a little bit older than mine, who are now being presented with this insurance bill to add their teenager onto their insurance policy, have said, I think I could get him his own car and driver and come out ahead instead of letting him drive on the roads. And again, it'll be safer for all of us. So I think these are important trends that we need to listen to. And importantly, for a group like NOACA, it's trends that we need to plan for. In other parts of the country, we talk about the fact that the nation is going to have 100 million more people by the year 2050. And how are we going to accommodate them? This is an area, as was pointed out, whose population is actually remaining stable, but the attributes of that population and the kinds of transportation services they demand are changing. And just as it is true for population growth, it is also true for population changes, and that is this. You could either plan for it or be overwhelmed by it. And those people who are smart, even in a limited resource environment, are planning for it and deploying projects accordingly, and are making tough choices to recognize what the greater Cleveland and greater northern Ohio of 2020, 2030, 2040, and 2050 are going to look like. So I was very impressed to hear how it looks like, based on your presentation, that NOACA is very much focused on precisely the right priorities and using hard data rather than emotion and or political factors to attack these questions. Politics infuses everything we do. You know, one of the things I remind people is that the best and worst part of public transportation is it's so damn public. And what I mean by that is, you know, it's really very hard to find another area of government that is treated to so many public meetings of an evening in order to not only explain through the NEPA process and the public engagement process, but also just to sell the vision to the public, where there's so much interface with those folks. And that's why things like NOACA going to social media, I think probably many of us could agree, was something you should have done years ago, and is now a real opportunity. And you know, you'll find that over time it's going to be the way that we're going to be communicating the vision and really selling transportation projects to the public going forward. Let me just also say, a lot of people are focused on financing, as we are. President Obama has made the state of good repair of our systems a principal focus. It's not always the sexiest investments we make, but within transit, we're now looking at north of an $80 billion backlog in the state of good repair of our systems. That's why I said, you know, you take Grace's presentation and just add more and more zeros. And a lot of that is in rail infrastructure and aging rail infrastructure, but even our bus infrastructure is in need of repair. And importantly, the President has put forward a fix-it-first agenda and has presented to Congress a $50 billion investment plan with general funds, not with trust funds, of which $9 billion would be invested just in public transportation. It would be, if you will, the equivalent of something close to a second Recovery Act for public transportation and for highways, in order to, again, put people to work using general funds, not trust funds, but fully paid for, not adding to the deficit. I would love to say that it's getting a broader hearing in Congress. I think for anyone who reads the newspapers these days, we are seeing, when it comes to funding legislation, sort of new heights of dysfunctionality in Congress. It is very sad for someone like me to observe. I worked up on a funding committee in Congress for 22 years. Many of my friends, and for that matter, my wife, are still up there. And it is a very, very rough time. But the President continues to cite the vision and the need to reinvest right here in the United States, and even in tough economic times, double down and invest in our infrastructure for all of those challenges that we're going to face going forward, whether it's the growing populations in high-growth areas or the changing populations in steady-state areas like this one. We're going to continue to push that agenda. And we're also looking forward to engaging the Congress in a discussion of our trust funds. You know, a lot of people have been somewhat, you know, depressed about the funding scenarios at the state level. And of course, when it comes to public transportation, this is not a slap at anyone, but Ohio is remarkably meager in its support for public transportation in terms of what comes out of the state. I have to say, I'm encouraged because of that inevitability argument that I make. But I'm also encouraged by the fact that around the country, perhaps not in Ohio, but around the country, more and more governors are recognizing that public transportation needs to be part of the state's solution. And sort of the old paradigm of, I'm the state DOT, I run the highway department, public transit is the responsibilities of the local communities and cities and whatever they can get from the FTA, and we all just stay in our lane, is clearly a formula for failure in terms of addressing all of the many challenges that Grace has pointed out, not just for this region, but those challenges mirrored across the United States. And we're seeing many states rise to it. Some of our best partners these days at the FTA are Governor Rick Snyder in Michigan, the mayor of Mesa, Arizona, for whom we are extending light rail right through his community coming out of Phoenix, and is actually now using his own STP funds to extend an FTA New Start project without federal dollars, just because of all of the property accumulation and to handle the growing population in that area. One of the areas in which we've made dramatic and really game-changing investments from the federal level in public transportation has been Salt Lake City. So I raised Rick Snyder in Salt Lake City and Mayor Smith in Mesa for a reason, and that is none of them would confuse any of these people for being a Democrat. But the reality is, increasingly, to those people who still want to think about this as being a partisan issue, it really isn't. It's about having vision or not having vision. And we have many, many Republicans at all levels of government, but most especially at the municipal levels of government. One of the things that we're so thrilled about having a mayor as our new secretary is mayors don't get to engage in kind of bloviating partisan arguments. They actually have to provide service to the people most directly. And also the voters know where they shop. So there's like this, because like there's no hiding from either the successes or failures of what you've succeeded in doing as a mayor. And that, as you get, whether it's, that's also true in some cases at the gubernatorial level. People are recognizing that this notion that the state will take care of the highways and transit will somehow take care of itself, and miraculously the transportation challenge of the overall state will be solved is sort of fallacious. And that's why we need, as is the theme of your organization, multimodal solutions. And we need to think of how to best deploy those multimodal solutions. And where there were not partnerships before, new partnerships have to emerge. And yes, probably in Ohio, that involves the state. And as it is in other states, increasingly all around the country. So, every region, especially when it comes to transportation, and most particular public transportation, has its own unique dynamics. We have a saying at the FTA that if you've seen one transit agency, you've seen one transit agency. Because in fact, I don't think you can really find two transit agencies that have the identical governance pattern, the identical funding sources, the identical mobility challenges, the identical populations to serve. Everyone's trying to do it their own way and their own mix. And some of the best projects we've launched, so I think even just this morning's BRT probably had 4 funding partners at least. And we've got some that have 10, including community development block grant funds from other federal agencies. And we've done stuff with the Department of Energy. I mean, people are thinking innovatively, and that's what NOACA needs to do as well. And it looks like you are well directed to doing just that based on the program that Grace put forward earlier today. We obviously want to continue to be your partner. I'm within the modal administrators in DOT between my colleague who does highways and aviation and pipelines. I'm sort of viewed as the state of good repair guy. I can get pretty excited about deteriorating, decrepit concrete and rail. My wife thinks it's a little sick, but it is nonetheless, this is the kind of stuff that we really must double down and reinvest in, These are investments that the taxpayer has already made and is absolutely essential in maintaining our ability to be prosperous in the future. It is always easy to get elected officials to the events with the balloons and the bunting when we are opening new infrastructure, providing the new extension. And we love those as much as anybody, and we finance a lot of them. But as I constantly remind the Secretary, whoever the Secretary is, and anyone else who will listen, we must really focus also on addressing the backlog of investments that we should have been making over these last 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Because we're going to be reaching a point soon, as we already have on certain facilities, where we're going to, for its lack of investment, we're going to lose the asset. And when you look at the total replacement of that asset, the price tag is far spookier. One of the things we point out, we're very proud of these kind of new investments we make. And we have a program at the FTA called the New Starts, Small Starts program. And that's where we help finance the health line. And that's where we have built new miles of rail in all these cities across the country, in places like light rail in Charlotte, bus rapid transit in El Paso, new light rail and bus rapid transit in Seattle. All of these investments I talked about in Salt Lake City, Los Angeles, New York. The reality is this. This is another example, Dallas, because I just happened to be on the phone with Joe's colleague down in Dallas. Many people don't realize this. Dallas now, a place where no one was supposed to get out of their pickup truck, Dallas now operates more miles of light rail than any city in the country. Dallas. So it really is remarkable. That people with vision, without regard for political affiliation, are stepping up and investing where they see it. But the other reality is this. If we lose just 2 to 3% of our ridership on transit systems that have existed for, in some cases, a century or more, if we lose just 2 to 3% of our ridership in places like New York, Boston, Miami, Chicago, San Francisco, Cleveland, for lack of investment, because the service became unreliable. If we lose just 2% of that ridership, we will lose more riders than all the riders we have gained on all the new construction we have done in Seattle and Dallas and Salt Lake and Charlotte. So with my goal from my president to grow transit ridership, to reduce our dependence on foreign oil, to reduce greenhouse gases, to give people more choices through multimodal solutions. If that's my charge, and all I've done is build out new systems while bleeding traffic from the older systems, I have failed. That's what sort of drives me. We need to do both. We need to think about the new. We're very excited about the BRT that we launched today. It's going to grow ridership between Lakewood and Cleveland and even beyond Lakewood. And it's exciting. It's the right thing to do for that corridor. We also need to take a hard look at the existing infrastructure and how we're financing that, lest we lose passenger counts there from unreliability. So that's my central message. Multimodal solutions are the solution. It looks like NOACA really is on a great path to doing the right things in this region. We at the DOT, not just FTA, but I'm sure if my highway colleague was here, Victor Mendez, he would say the exact same thing. We want to continue to be your partner. Don't be a stranger. You know where to find us. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Peter, for that informative presentation. I think the one takeaway that we've all heard here is that we're on the right path, and we're setting both NOACA and the entire region up to move forward in a way that makes sense. And we really appreciate, one, you sharing all the expertise that you shared with us today, but most importantly, being here with us and being part of what we're trying to do here in our region. That means a lot to us, so thank you. I wish we had more time, and we could probably stay here all day, But next, we're going to turn it over to Brian Newbacher, who's going to come up and moderate a panel. And again, this really is your panel. This is where we're doing the questions and answers, because I'm sure you have a lot of questions and answers. So if Joe Calabrese and Grace can come back up to the podium and join us, we're going to spend a little bit of time taking questions and answers. Brian?
Okay. Thank you very much, Valarie. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm a little taller than some of the other speakers, so I don't know about the distance from the microphone here, but we'll make it work. It occurs to me that our panel here has made some great points today, and I'd like to start us off. We're going to have the ability for you to ask questions, and Gail Godek has a microphone, and she'll come to you. And so you might consider for the next minute, what do you want to ask this panel here? And certainly it's a highly esteemed panel with especially Administrator Rogoff coming all the way from Washington, D.C. to be with us this morning and this afternoon. But I'd like to pick up on a point that the Administrator made about Ohio. An Administrator used the term remarkably meager when it comes to Ohio's support of transit in the state budget. And I know, Joe, you've been active in the Ohio Public Transit Association, and Grace, this is very important to you, and Valarie is the board president. But Administrator Rogoff, if you could talk a little bit more about what Michigan, Arizona, and Utah are doing, and then maybe Joe can pick up on what has been the barriers to the mindset in Columbus.
Sure. We're just going to talk about it.
I think so.
No, actually, we have special microphones.
Why don't we, while he does that?
Yeah, okay, very good.
Okay, well, while they're setting up the individual mics, I'll do this from the podium. Let me spend a particular focus on Michigan because it's nearby, and it's one, obviously, with the current state of things in Detroit that we're spending a lot of time on. You know, Detroit is the Motor City and has a long history of being very much focused on its cars. But the other reality is that Detroit, probably in terms, we did a review of this in terms of transit-dependent populations and the need for people to have mobility, particularly to where the jobs are now in Detroit. And obviously it has punishingly high unemployment, but it has, there are jobs that actually go wanting, particularly in the suburbs, for the inability of people to connect to them. Detroit also has a very unfortunate history of about as balkanized a transit system as you can have, where you have a suburban transit provider who on certain city streets are not allowed to open its doors. And in certain cases, people who are moving from, say, parts of Oakland County down into Wayne County would have to get off one bus, transfer to another bus because that suburban bus didn't cross into the city, and the city buses did not cross into the suburbs. The famous 8-mile divide for those people who know Detroit well. It is not hard to improve on what they've had. In fact, when we looked at this, the demand for transit services in Detroit were some perhaps ranked 9th in the country, but their availability of transit services was 109th. It is a particularly dysfunctional situation that Governor Snyder, to his credit, was starting to stand up to a couple of years ago, well before Detroit's situation became most acute recently. And what his vision was for finally, after more than 20 years of trying, establishing a regional transit authority for Greater Detroit. Not necessarily immediately to subsume the transit agencies in the suburbs, but to have some early wins to show regional cooperation with improved mobility. And what is he looking at? BRT. And what was his model? The Cleveland Health Line. And the idea is, rather than have just one sort of poster child light rail system that was going to run up Woodward Avenue, but to take the considerable amount of money that that light rail line would have cost, that also, by the way, would have stopped at 8 Mile, and instead run 4 separate BRT networks that would truly connect the regions of the country and connect residential areas to job centers in the suburbs. And that's what has been worked on. And frankly, Secretary LaHood and I played an important role. We met probably with more individual state legislatures to try and get state legislators to get them to finally, after 27 attempts, to pass a regional transit authority for Greater Detroit. And now they have. And their second board meeting is like next week. And it's not going to fix everything overnight, but they have a governance structure, and the governor has come forward in a difficult funding environment and says he wants to put a referendum on the ballot to get the requisite taxing funds to fund regional transit for Detroit and run BRT through these areas. And it is part of Governor Snyder's recognition that the notion that somehow Michigan can prosper while Detroit continues to spiral is not a reality. And that mobility is an important part of the solution, and he wants to do it through affordable bus rapid transit, and frankly, they can do it there. For an area that, for a city that lost 600,000, went from over 2 million people to a population of 600,000, they have the available lanes. You're not going to have huge arguments about taking out a lane for bus rapid transit in Detroit. So there's opportunities here, and the governor has led the way to finally get a regional solution in place. Like I said, it's not going to fix things overnight, but the structure is now in place. There's going to be bipartisan support for a referendum to raise the necessary funds to do it. And it's going to be a game changer, I believe, sooner than people think in terms of what is a very challenged transit environment in the Detroit area.
Thank you very much, Administrator. So now I think we'll pick up on that, and it seems like Ohio could learn some lessons from that. And Grace, did you have any thoughts about how we might further educate the policymakers?
I think we can send our buses down to Columbus, pick up the legislators, and bring them up here to take a look at our region. That's what I think we can do initially. I want to emphasize that when we talk about multimodal solutions, I like BRT. And that's because it's a way to get both the automobile culture and the public transit culture together. And it's improving roadway as well as the pedestrian and the transit environment. And it's something that then improves the connectivity for all. And I think it's focusing on those kinds of solutions that are win-wins that can really move the legislators in the direction of the vision we're trying to achieve.
That's a great point about BRT, Grace. And certainly, as the Administrator referred to the BRT and the Euclid Corridor project, Joe, people have been visiting from other cities. I know Pittsburgh was in some time ago. What can you do from this point then to maybe say to the people in Columbus, this is a great plan. How can we build on this? How can we maybe leverage a program like BRT and get more support from Columbus?
Well, thank you. I hope things are changing. The question was asked before, what is the state's participation? And I've certainly been probably the most critical advocate for more state funding for transit, and it certainly has been, Peter. We fund highways out of Columbus. If you have transit issues, it's a local issue. At one point in time, when I came to Cleveland from New York in 2000, the state provided $43 million to public transit. That $43 million is divided by 59 transit systems, so don't get too excited. But last year, in the last several years, it's $8.5 million statewide. While the typical state provides 23% of the operating funds for public transit, the share to our budget, the share to total transit is less than 1%, into our budget is about 0.6%. So it really has not been moving in the right direction. However, I think things are changing. I think the younger citizens of this country, the ones we're trying to retain and attract, are much more public transit oriented, as Grace and Peter talked about. They're demanding more public transit. As we go out and have community meetings, certainly as Hunter talks with the NEOSCC, have their regional meetings, public transit is always one of the first things on the agenda. Under former Governor Strickland, as he had his 21st Century Task Force on Transportation, many of the ODOT people around the state were just amazed in public hearings that it wasn't all about roads and bridges, it was about public transit. So I think things are changing, and even with this administration, they're about to launch the first ever statewide needs assessment for public transit funding. The consultant was just hired. Again, there will be we're told and promised there will be a very large group, association they will work with, and public transit will be well represented on that panel. So we hope that progress is made. Not just general public transit, not just BRT, but especially for services for people with disabilities. Our RTA, we spend about $20 million a year out of our budget just for services for people who can't use our buses and trains because of their disability, and that area of our business is growing at double digits every year. So it's a major issue, and for many of these people, it is their freedom, it is their life, it's the difference between them supporting themselves and we as a community supporting them. So I think it's certainly very cost effective as well. So we hope that these additional studies will move in the right direction and get people to change their mind.
Great.
Brian, I'd also like to add to that, again, focusing on the commonalities and the win-wins. Coming from Chicago, or working in Chicago in the transit and transportation environment, making sure that we communicate that public transit is not simply an urban amenity. In Chicago, you have actually a 6-county region, and 5 of those counties are what is called the collar counties around Cook County, and public transit serves all 6 of the counties. There's commuter rail system, there's suburban bus system, there's paratransit, as well as the urban bus and trail. And so if we think about and try to promote transit as a regional amenity, I think that helps also to make that win-win case.
That's a great point, Grace. Thank you. And Valarie, did you have anything to add on this part?
No, I think they've covered it.
Okay, great. At this point, do we have anyone who would like to ask a question in the audience? Here we are over here on the right.
Mr. Rogoff, welcome to Cleveland. I live in an east side suburb of Cleveland. There are many people in the community that are very concerned about something that I'd like to bring to your attention, so I'll mention it and I'll ask you to respond or give me an answer to it. A very large number of residents in Northeast Ohio and the 12 counties of NEOSCC are challenging and very upset with the huge federal dollars, $4.25 million, being spent here on entirely non-scientific data collection and conclusions drawn from the self-selecting participants in the NEOSCC scenario planning process. One of the main questions that keeps coming up in our meetings is, why is the federal government funding this non-scientific data collection process? It seems to be so counter to what NOACA does, where they're basing all of these huge decisions on real hard data, where this scenario planning process is completely the opposite. It's people who feel like showing up or who are forced to show up by their agencies who give their opinions, and then their opinions are put together in board meeting statistics, and those are the statistics that are being sent out to Northeast Ohio as representing Northeast Ohio, when in fact they are not exactly those statistics. Why is the federal government funding this non-scientific process? I'm confused. Thank you.
I'm also confused because I'm not particularly focused on precisely the study you're talking about, but let me do this. Let me find out particularly what study and what grant and what purpose. If this is part of our the research that has been going on as it relates to sustainability and climate change. I mean, that is a fairly new program with methodologies and research regimes that may be different from what the MPO process and other processes are accustomed to. But I don't know the specifics about your grant. But what I will do is, if I can get your information, I'll seek to get you a better and more informed answer when I get back.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
We want him to have our contact information.
Well, we can arrange that for you.
Here, take this. Take mine. My email address isn't a secret. It's peter.rogoff@dot.gov. It comes right to my BlackBerry, and I'll see to it that you get a good answer.
Thank you very much. Do we have a question from the audience? We have one from Mayor Summers of Lakewood, one of our board members.
Thank you, members of the panel. To Administrator Rogoff, I'm intrigued with your sense of inevitability and how you matured to that perhaps 15 years ago till now. I'm perplexed when I look at some of the issues that we sort out in Ohio as to why people feel and act as they do. So I guess I'd be interested in your view of those who don't see that inevitability that you see. What do they see, in your opinion?
The rear view mirror. I think importantly, among the reasons why I speak specifically to the inevitability is sometimes the sea changes that you see in certain communities. And let me give an example. Something we haven't talked about as much as part of the business case for transit in regions like this, and that is the magnets for jobs. Part of what part of that thread of thought about younger people driving less and less is that they want to use alternative transportation options more and more. This was with Secretary LaHood, but I held a meeting with some chambers of commerce from the Atlanta suburbs. And some of these Atlanta suburbs had been sort of sometimes identified as the nation's capital for sprawl. And what happened in greater Atlanta is when they had so much sprawl, they woke up and discovered that they were intensely congested. And some of the suburban counties, including counties that years ago by design opted out of being part of the MARTA system for historical reasons I think many of us know, and it's not worth repeating. Those counties are now desperate for a transit solution, not just because of their own congestion, but as some of the leaders of the businesses in that community said, and some of the county executives, they were really tired of losing job relocation decisions to Charlotte. In Charlotte, we're building light rail. We've seen a lot of young workers seeking to move downtown. And our next step is we're going to be connecting by light rail the core of the campus of UNC Charlotte with the heart of downtown. It's going to be seamless, literally. There's a downtown campus to the university. Students are going to cross-register, and they're going to get back and forth between class on light rail. And that is becoming a magnet. And for companies and others, including in transit investments we're making in the Research Triangle area of North Carolina. That's also bleeding jobs from Atlanta. So companies like Red Hat and others that are sort of on the cutting edge of the new technology economy that people want are gravitating to where these areas are. And I believe eventually even those leaders that have not woken up to it are going to wake up to that. And that is whether they like or don't like a vision of everyone riding together on a common subsidized system, it's elemental to the growth of a prosperous economy. All of these cities are chasing the same new tech workers, whether it's in biotech, IT, other things that are going to be the real job-generating industries in the future. And the folks that only want to look in the rearview mirror and not forward are going to be the ones that are going to be left behind. Better transit is what's forward. Balkanized highway versus transit, approaches are what's in the rearview mirror. So what do I think they're looking at? I think they're looking in the rearview mirror.
Excellent points. Excellent points. And we probably have time for one more. Please identify yourself.
Howard Aiken, Amherst Township. Interested in your comments on the Google car, which seems to have, I'm not sure if that fits in your vision, but I'd like to hear your comments.
The Google car, I'm not going to endorse any particular product. So let's just talk about driverless vehicles. I think they're an incredibly important part of the solution for the senior citizens. Wish I could put my mother in one now. Right? Because I'm not sure she should be driving what she's driving. I will say this specifically about Google. They are putting a lot of money into into the development of that product. I think they really are going to change the face of this. And this isn't just the benefits of being able to take the drivers. We're learning a lot, and I was very encouraged. There are real safety issues and real lessons learned to be had in the development of driverless vehicles. And one of the greatest professionals I've had to work with, who was the deputy administrator of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, now works on the Google car project for Google. And I thought it was an excellent hire because we're learning some things. This is going to get kind of modally elliptical, but I'll come back to the Google car. Among the issues being looked at on the Asiana airline crash in San Francisco is that particular Airbus aircraft has become so dependent on basically automatic pilot solutions. And a lot of people may not know that aircraft doesn't actually have this traditional wheel and yoke that most aircrafts do. That generation of Airbus aircraft is really driven with little levers and buttons. And is there an issue with the fact that pilots have not had enough experience landing those aircrafts at SFO, and because we've become too dependent on the automated solution? Issues for the driverless car as we come forward. But I do believe that if not a fleet of Google cars, the whole notion, this whole notion of having automated propelled vehicles has been looked at for decades, actually, from the perspective of how we get less congestion in the highway infrastructure. Platooning of cars. Actually, if all of us are going to be on the Ohio Turnpike, even through congested hours, we will all get through to our destination a lot more quickly if we all went the same speed rather than all these variable speeds that actually creates a lot of congestion. Things like the Google car will, I think, help propel us to some of those solutions as well, which is an important part of it. I mean, I'm the transit guy, right? So I talk about transit as the solution for the congested highway. There are solutions out there where we're going to get more and better productivity out of our existing highways, and we need to focus on those too.
Very good question. Very good points by the administrator. With that, thank you very much. We have one more item on our program, and to get us there, I'll turn it back over to Valarie and Grace.
Thank you. Let's give our panel a round of applause. And again, I think we should actually also give Administrator Rogoff another round of applause, because being here today and spending so much time with us means a lot to us. I'd like to again thank my panelists for participating today. Brian, thank you for moderating this. I'm going to turn over to Grace for our special presentation, the moment we've all been waiting for. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Ms. McCall. The Walter F. Ehrnfelt Jr. Award for Outstanding Regional Contribution bears the name of the late Walter F. Ehrnfelt Jr., a former mayor of Strongsville and a longtime member of the NOACA Board of Directors. NOACA initiated this award to recognize an individual who exhibits the superior leadership, regional cooperation, accomplishment, and dedication exemplified in the public career of Wally Ehrnfelt. Wally was the mayor of Strongsville for 25 years and is Cuyahoga County's longest-standing mayor. His motto was, "It's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice." This is the 10th year NOACA has presented this award. We're fortunate to have some of the previous winners here today. Please stand if you are one of our prior winners. And I know that Howard Mayer is sitting there, as well as Commissioner Dan Troy. In the audience, I also have Commissioner Steve Handley and Engineer Bob Clyburn. It gives me great pleasure now to announce this year's Walter J. Ehrnfelt Jr. Award. Drum roll, please. Lake County Engineer James Gills. Congratulations. Before I ask Engineer Gills to come up, I'd like to say a few words about him. He has served as a member of the Board of Directors on NOACA since 2001. He also served as president in 2010. He has served as the chairman of our Water Quality Committee and is currently continuing in that role. Jim is unique in that he has successfully initiated major projects in both transportation and environmental planning, which continue to positively affect Lake County and the region. Here are some examples. In 2002, Engineer Gills initiated a major investment study that resulted in ODOT funding that totaled almost $200 million for the rehabilitation and expansion of State Route 2 in Lake County. Construction will be completed this year, and that is one of the largest financial projects in both NOACA and the region's history. Engineer Gills is also responsible for bringing the Vrooman Road Bridge and Corridor project to fruition. Another first attributable to Engineer Gills' leadership is the $1.4 million Leroy Center roundabout, which is currently under construction. His accomplishments also, as I mentioned, encompass the environment. For example, he spearheaded the successful development of a stormwater management program in 2003. Through his efforts, Lake County became a national leader with comprehensive stormwater management program. It addresses quality for water and quantity concerns on a county and multi-watershed basis. The leadership that Engineer Gills has brought to NOACA, he's also brought to Lake County, in that Lake County Engineer's Office has been recognized by many national associations for awards. He has led the Lake County Engineer's Office to receive the 2003 Engineering Excellence Award from the American Council of Engineering Companies, the Outstanding Civil Engineering Achievement Award from the American Society for Civil Engineers, and the 2006 Historic Bridge Award from the Federal Highway Administration, Ohio Department of Transportation, and the Ohio Historic Preservation Office. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating Engineer Jim Gills.
It's alive. I'm not so sure she's talking about the right person. I wish to thank everybody for the few years that I've been in NOACA. I joined NOACA being elected in 2000, took office in 2001. It was suggested that I should come down to Cleveland and talk to the people at NOACA as part of my initiation into the political arena. I went down to NOACA. I met Howard Mayer, and the first thing out of Howard Mayer's mouth was, "Well, Engineer Gills, it's nice to have you. I hope we will have you. I think you should really get involved in NOACA because this is where it is." Well, as you can see, I took his advice. Thank you, Howard. But aside from that, one of the things that I want to do, I was in private practice for 40 years, and by the way, I'm an environmental engineer in a highway engineer's clothes. I spent 40 years in the water and wastewater business, which is why I have been able to help NOACA and the region in that aspect of their endeavors. But one of the things I wanted to do when I got elected is to give back to the region. I love this region. I think the Northeast Ohio, Northwest Ohio, all along the lake is the greatest area that anyone could be in. And I felt that if I could do something for the region, I would certainly go out of my way to do it. NOACA seemed to be the place to do it. I started there. As you can see, I've been very involved. I will stay involved as long as I'm in office, and I've really enjoyed my associations with the people in NOACA, with the board, and again, with the region. Thank you very kindly. I am very, very honored to be honored by my peers with this special award, and I'm glad to join a fraternity of outstanding people that have contributed to the region in the past. Thank you.
Congratulations, Engineer Gills. You truly embody the ideals set forth by this award, and I hope many people will follow your fine example. In addition to the individual award, your name has been added to the permanent plaque that is displayed in the NOACA boardroom. Please, we will have Cheryl Ineski do the honors.
But that's not my picture. It's Molly. Oh,
Thank you very much, and congratulations again, Engineer Gills. That concludes the 2013 NOACA annual meeting. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon and a great weekend.
All right, thank you.